Once this broadcast is done, it will automatically feed through. So I'll set it as a playlist for 532, and it'll feed through my video page under the HCDE 532 page. So, hello everybody. My name is Mike Sinkula. I am your host for 532. How 532 came about was, well, let's just make this assumption. Many of you are probably taking this class as a prerequisite to 537, correct? Who is that's your purpose? Most, right? The user-centered web design class, 537, with Boyd is awesome. So here's how I ended up teaching this class, the way we're doing this. I went through the HCDE program myself. Right? Backstory of that is I've been teaching at Seattle Central Community College for 15, almost 16 years, hence the SCCC. Now they took community at a community college, and now I'm screwed because if I go and change my URL, then all my SEO will be down with it, right? Unless there's some magic that I don't know about. So I'm stuck with that URL, whatever, it's not that big of a deal. But I host all my stuff on my premium DW account. So if you click on the flame up in the right-hand corner there, that will take you to my freelance business website. And oh, the old HCDE website that I guess they changed the theme. When did they do that? They changed it to the new COE theme. This quarter. This quarter? Yeah. I saw an email come out a little while ago about how the College of Engineering had made a new theme. So the website for the HCDE website is housed under the College of Engineering's domain, and they use Drupal as a content management system. Has anybody ever worked with Drupal at all? A little bit. Learning curve is steep, right? But anyway, so Drupal works like a lot of websites do, where you build a theme that then is the markup and the presentation for the website, and then a database fills in all the information and it renders itself as a dynamic website, kind of like Amazon or something. So it does. I saw an email come through a few months ago, saying that the College of Engineering had developed a new theme that looked like the new University of Washington website's theme, and I was like, uh-oh, it's going to not be too long before my old design is gone. So if you ever saw this old website there, I went through the HCDE department, like I said, starting in 2010. And my capstone project, I got away with doing it by myself and not taking the capstone class because I was doing them a favor and teaching the labs for Suzanne's class. And it was a nice relationship. But nonetheless, I used one of the College of Engineering's older themes, or the theme that they had at that time. I did some card sorting on the information architecture. And then they screwed it all up again, and they have it now back to future and current students, right? So I guess if you're a future student, you're not allowed to go to the current student tab and see what's there. Does anybody ever feel that way at all? So I feel that way a little bit. So, but anyhow, I did this and did that theme, did a little bit of visual design, and a little bit of UI design a long time ago. So, this class then came about for when I was here doing my degree. I TA'd the 537 class, which really meant that I was just teaching the lab portion of the 537 class. Because the 537 class, what you're going to do in that class is you are going to go through a bunch of user-centered design methodologies, doing card sort, like we said, doing task, user matrix type stuff, doing some prototypes and usability testing, et cetera, to do a user-centered design type site for, you know, a nonprofit or a business. Nonprofits usually work out pretty well. But the end product that you need to have at the end of that class is a high fidelity prototype, meaning that it has to be done in HTML and CSS, utilizing JavaScript and PHP, et cetera, right? Some people choose then to do the website using the content management system like WordPress or Drupal. I would, has anybody ever heard of WordPress or used WordPress at all? Okay, so my site right here is built on WordPress, and the presentation of the website then is a theme built using HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and PHP that then pulls the data out of the database, pulls the images out of the uploads folder, and puts it all together on the fly dynamically to present said website. So where this class comes into play then is for the time I was here, they had a lab associated with 537 during the summer. So I had to teach students HTML, CSS, a little bit of JavaScript, and PHP in an 8-week summer quarter, which really I had to teach it to them in 6 weeks. So they could do the last 2 weeks to produce that website. Yeah, some of you were like, oh my God, yeah, it wasn't, it was not pretty. So what they decided to do was, when I was leaving, graduating, was to pull that lab away and make it into its own workshop class, which here we are today, right? And then it is also available for more than just the people that need it as a pre-req. First time we ran it, it had 20 people in it. Last year it had 29. I think the last I saw we had 35 or 36 on the roster here. Okay, so that being said, I'm just going to kind of go through roll real quickly. Like I said, most of you are HCDE majors, and I'm assuming that you are taking it as prerequisite 537. If you have another purpose for being here, let me know, right? And let's kind of chat about, you know, why you're here and what you want to do with your life. So, but roller. Okay. Taking it as a prereq.
No, just so I learned web design.
Okay, so when you say learn web design, here's kind of, I'm not so stoked on the title of this class. I wanted to call it Web Development Workshop. They labeled it Web Design Studio. So really what this is web production, web development to a design spec, where we are going to talk about how to build a website to basically the old design for the HCDE site, the last generation. So we're going to build you a website for yourself that is built to that specification, right? We'll talk about color palettes. We'll talk about setting type, you know, column width, type size, leading, et cetera, like that. But you're not going to be designing an information architecture or doing wireframes or doing visual design, et cetera, right? Like I said, so hopefully that title is not that misleading, right? No? Okay. Was that what you expected? Oh, great. Okay. Yeah, just when I see the title like that, I'm like, you know?
Yeah, it's like visual design. This is more like how to put the document together.
Yeah, this is how to build, right? You know, and learn. I mean, I'm going to talk design theory, like, you know, what a 12-column grid is, and, you know, setting type and that kind of stuff. Oh yeah, this is Thomas. He's our TA over here. So it's been a long day. Thomas was a student of mine at Seattle Central. I don't know how many years ago. Two-ish. And you TA'd the first time we did this here in this room, right? So this is your third time, right? And now the college is paying him. I'm not paying him, right? So it's all, he's got his own UW email address now. It's awesome. So, so he'll be TAing the class, which means that primarily he is going to be that guy because we're going to code together in class, right? So he'll be kind of walking around if you get stuck, but also if you do get stuck, remember that there's going to be the video lecture that you can go back and watch. All right, Nicholas, HCD.
Yep.
Clint.
Right here.
And HCDE.
Yep.
Heather Bales, HCD. Yep. It says it right here. Rachel. Kathleen, Valerie, Kathleen.
Yep.
Valerie or Kathleen.
Valerie.
Jeremy.
Yeah, nailed it.
Nailed it.
People try too hard.
Oh yeah, because it is kind of, yeah, yeah. Joseph Bernstein, yeah. And Kanika. So SIMX, what's that?
MSIM, it's Master of Information Management.
Okay.
Yeah.
What department is that in?
High school.
High school. Okay. High school. We got an high school person here. Demi, Bo. Ann Berger. Wilson. Kira.
Here.
Amani.
Here.
Jennifer. Gibbon. And then another high school, Courtney Harris. She sent me an email over there. That's right, she's the one who sent it. Laura Hunter. India, Irish. Anastasia. Did I say that right?
Yeah, and excuse me, I usually say Anastasia.
Okay. Spencer, James. Thomas Coins. Dana Lee.
Yeah.
Diane Lee. Sangyun. Did I say that anywhere near correctly? No? Probably not. Sana. Yanina? Close?
Yeah, good.
Really? This is the gauntlet that I walk, right? You know? So, Aiden, Little? Elizabeth or Elizabeth?
Leah, that's my.
Okay. Ryan Moore? And Ricky Mudd? Nathan Ormsby?
Here.
Alan Reese? Here. Okay. And then Ann Schwabel? And you're mechanical engineering?
Right.
Julia Snyder? David Taylor?
Wes Scott?
Okay, Scott?
Thanks.
Nicholas Zimmer?
Here.
Now, I may have not printed out the B list. So are there a couple of PhD students here that I did not call on the roster, or did that get included? Are there a couple of PhD students in here? Nobody's passing up to it? Yeah, because there was an A section and a B section. Where?
I'm not a PhD student, so you got my name.
Okay, so what was your name?
Jamal Thorne?
And did you register for the B section?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I didn't print that list out. So I'll go do that. And is there anybody else that was registered for the B section?
Not the B section, but you got it.
What was your name?
Just I'm on AMA.
Did you just register?
This morning.
Oh, okay. So it may not have. We'll make sure we print out or get a new. Because what we're going to do is, you might be thinking to yourself, why is the dude bothering taking roll, man? Whatever. Sounds kindergarten-like. What we're going to do, again, if it's okay with you guys, is to track your progress and to grade you guys. How we're going to do that is we are going to, so let's take a look at the one from last quarter. We're going to be basically on my site, have a list of the students and a link to where your site lives on students.washington.edu. Okay, so if anybody has a problem with their name appearing on my website, please let me know and we can just do your initials, right? So does anybody have a, well, email Thomas or myself if you don't want that to happen. But that's the way we're going to track everybody. So we have the winter 2016 list here, which did you put anybody up yet, Thomas? Probably not. No. No. The student, the client staging area student list. And if everybody's hitting my site at the same time, this is, Daddy's got DreamHost hosting. So yeah, anyway, hopefully it's not gonna crash here. Winter 2016, yeah, we don't have the list up yet. So we will be, like I said, putting that list together, and then how you're gonna be graded is Thomas is gonna go week by week to see that you did the lecture sizes and go ahead and grade you, okay? So let's talk about what this class is, what this class is not. Like I said, the title of this class is a little misleading, but the whole title, well, let me hear what you guys think about when you hear the title web design, right? When you hear the title web design, do you straight think like HTML, right? You think like UI, visual design, that kind of stuff. There's a lot of people that think to themselves, come on. So there's a lot of people that think to themselves when they hear the term web design, HTML, CSS, kind of putting things together on the fly in a coding type environment. So I would rather say that this is kind of, like I said, web building, web production, web development, but using design aspects. This is going to kill me. Web design aspects of, oh, come on, seriously. Is it stalled for you guys? Yeah. Yeah, everybody hit it really hard at the same time is what happened. Then that thing goes off every now and again. Yes, restart. There we go. Yeah, every now and again, like I said, if like people hit it really hard at the same time, sometimes it exceeds my RAM allocation and it stalls, or you have to reset. So anyway, what this class is, like I said, Web Design Studio. It's really, like I said, a class that is specifically a prereq for 537, and that's the way I teach it. Okay? So what that means then is, well, let's say winter 2016. Here we are, Wednesday, 6 to 7:50 in this room. I think this room is awesome, and they put me in here 1 year, and then I kept on requesting the same room because the first time I taught the labs, I was in C Hall, and we all had like really ancient computers in there. Felt like I was in somebody's dusty old workshop. It was all that great. But this course, we're going to give you an overview of the basic principles and practices of professional website design and development. Okay? Through a series of step-by-step exercises, you will build a personal website using industry standard techniques. So if you look over here in the sidebar, the exercises that we're going to be doing is each week there are a couple of exercises that we will run over a series of 2 weeks. Okay? But basically what we're going to be doing is step by step, today we're going to end up setting up your server space. You're either students.washington, or is anybody a TA or staff? Okay? Because last time there was people that were students that all of a sudden got moved to being a TA. You might be on staff.washington instead of students.washington. We'll get there. We'll talk about it when we get there. So we're going to set up your server space. You're going to create a very rudimentary first web page, meaning you are going to put some text in there, and then you are going to mark up text, meaning your H1, your H2 tags, your paragraph tags, some ordered lists, some unordered lists, and then you're going to do a little styling and post that to your website. Then week by week, we're going to start making it more into, like I said, if you want to see the final product of what we are doing in this class, it's not the one. Come back. Say responsive. Here it is. So this is basically, we're going to be building you a prototype that looks like, in other words, if you saw this website right here, would you think to yourself, wow, that looks pretty similar to just about every other website in the universe, right? Okay, so there are lots of things that then you can do differently. In other words, well, you can have a navigation that has a bar that goes all the way across, right? You can have this spotlight go all the way out to the edges, kind of like the new, let's put it this way. If I looked at the new HCDE Washington.edu site, this build right here is fundamentally the same as this build, right? The only thing that is really different is the presentation of the build, meaning I wish I was taller, but header, banner, logo area, navigation, spotlights, widget boxes. Logo, banner with some navigation and stuff up there. navigation, spotlight, that rotates. We're going to do that in here too. Widget boxes. And it's really, to me, if you look past the visual design and you look at the structure, we've all kind of come to the same build, right, over the years. So I'm going to teach you that standard build. The only thing is, I mean, you can explore different backgrounds and different sizing and all that kind of stuff if you want. You know, that may be a little step ahead of where you might feel like you can do it this quarter. But if you follow along and we code your website together, you're going to come out with a prototype like this that you can then go ahead and change the colors and do what you want to it and turn it into your own little kind of portfolio bio page, right? So we're building a prototype that, yeah, is purple and gold because we're at UW, but is still, you know, a functional, normal site that then you can edit to make custom to your thing, right? So if we then go into, let's say, a page like this, oh, text over to the left-hand side, sidebar, navigation over to the right. How interesting. Text over to the left. Widget. Right. So it's basically a very standard design that we're going to go through and put together. Does anybody, let's put it this way. I'm assuming that you know pretty much zip about HTML, CSS, JavaScript, PHP. So that's where we're starting. Does that sound like everybody? Is there anybody that does have some HTML experience? A few of you? Okay. How hardcore, though?
Full stack, bro.
Full stack, yeah. That is so a buzzword these days. Full stack engineer, man. What does that mean? I don't know. I know Python. That's kind of, I mean, that's kind of sort. Anyway, moving on. Yeah, so I'm going to assume that, like I said, you know nothing about HTML. So if you've done some HTML before, maybe you've opened up some HTML and edited some HTML, right? We're going to start and build from the ground up. So the objectives, again, for this class, you'll build a website that has a successful underlying structure and navigational foundation, readable website pages, appropriate content layout for desktop and mobile environments. So we're going to make it responsive, meaning right? So if you look at this then on your phone or on your tablet at whatever viewport size, things will, you'll notice that the navigation changed to a toggle menu, right? And then there might be a bug in this toggle menu. Yep, where'd my navigation go? We'll talk about that. Branded visual design using a color palette and imagery. So we're going to talk about, okay, let's say you are tasked with designing a website for a company. They have a logo. They have a color palette that they want you to use, okay? So that means that you might have to use a specific typeface, right? Which translates into, I need to find the font for the typeface. Pop quiz, difference between typeface and font. Who knows?
Typeface is the actual like shape of the types, like Arial or Helvetica, but font is all the other elements like bold, italic, size.
Close. Typeface is the actual original design, the way the designer intended it. A font is a manufactured set of that typeface. In other words, if we say Arial, or let's say Helvetica, right? Helvetica is a design typeface that has a set of characters. Well, you need the font Helvetica to have it render on your computer, meaning the digital file of Helvetica resides on your computer. Does that make sense? So font, the definition of font is actually a French word that means casting, I think, something around like that. From the movable type days, right, when they had the blocks of characters, that was a manufactured set of characters called a font of a typeface. Trivia, I love trivia. So branded visual design using a color palette and imagery. So we'll use the UW color palette. Apparently they've changed the colors now. Again, they seem to change the colors every 3 or 4 years. Gold is always different, right? You can use pink for all I care. Doesn't matter to me, right? You will learn a lot about HTML and CSS. You will learn fundamental PHP and fundamental JavaScript. So anybody in here a programmer? What language?
Python, C#.
Okay. So you will, why I ask that is, when it comes to PHP and JavaScript, it's pretty much all the same. You know, conditional statements, arrays, loops, variables, statements, etc. If that makes sense to people, right? So we'll talk about how to use PHP to do a couple of things. Modularize our code, meaning if we have a multi-page website, we don't need to write all the code for every single page. We can compile snippets of code as pieces, right? So we'll use PHP to do that. We'll also use PHP to say, if you're on this page, if you're on the About page, highlight the About menu, stuff like that. We will talk about JavaScript and jQuery to control things like slideshows and, toggle menus. Okay. Required software. I'm choosing Dreamweaver for you guys in this class. If you think Dreamweaver is beneath you, that's fine. You're free to use whatever you want. Did anybody, who thinks that Dreamweaver, what? Right? So Dreamweaver is part of the Adobe suite. And I use it as a code editor and a site manager if you're using the FTP file transfer protocol, right? I will use, so Dreamweaver is nice to have a code editor and a file manager using FTP file transfer protocol all in one, right? If you are doing things like managing your code with a team of people, team of developers using GitHub. Does anybody use GitHub at all? Everybody heard of GitHub? Okay. So GitHub, what GitHub is then is a version control, repository, social, right? It's got a lot of different functions. But what you can do instead of using file transfer protocol, meaning I'm going to, from my hard drive, just send this to the server, right? You can then send code to GitHub, right? And then, does anybody use command line in here, right? Terminal, or on PCs, what do you use, PuTTY? I don't know, yeah? Yeah, Mac, what you would, yeah. I'm allergic to PCs too, right? So you can then use command line, or what they call shell access, to then get into your server and have your server pull the files from GitHub. So that's the way, if everybody's working as a team, right? And you might overwrite each other's work, right? So if you're gonna do that route, then it's better to separate your code environment from the file managed sites environment, right? So Adobe also makes an application called Brackets. Has anybody ever heard of Brackets? It is a much lighter weight code environment, right? Dreamweaver is kind of a heavyweight code environment, meaning there's a lot of bells and whistles to Dreamweaver that we're not going to use in here, okay? So, but I'm going to do all the lecture sizes in Dreamweaver and do it that route, okay? So somebody wrote me an email today asking me if you absolutely need a Dreamweaver for the class today, right? Yes and no, meaning it'd be nice if you had it today, but the exercise is due at the end of next week, right? So how many of you got Dreamweaver already? How many of you didn't know we were going to do Dreamweaver but have it? The Adobe code, okay. So. You can then do Dreamweaver. The Adobe suite now for students is $20 a month, right? So it's pretty much worth it. You know, if you're going to be some kind of a designer, you're probably going to need Photoshop and Illustrator at some point in time, and then using Dreamweaver as well. Apparently, you can also get free Dreamweaver access at those places, but now that they have the laptop policy around here, doesn't really matter. Required text, HTML and CSS design by John Duckett. So basically, if we look at the schedule, as we're doing the lectures together, as we are doing the lectures together, week by week by week, I want you to read the chapters out of that Duckett book as more background. In other words, I am going to give you a decent amount of background theories, etc. What is HTML? What is CSS? What is PTAG? But this book is pretty awesome and is a really good read, actually. It's not a boring code book, right? So let's put it this way. This is a book that if you're going to do this kind of thing, you're going to want this on your bookshelf, right? So the other book is the Responsive Web Design book by Ethan Marcotte. This you can read in a night, actually, right? So when Suzanne told me that I needed to cover responsive design, however many years ago in the labs, she sent me that book as a PDF, and I read it in the night, and then I thought to myself, wow, this is a book I want on my shelf. So I went and actually bought the paperback. So what is responsive design? If some of you are thinking to yourself, well, that doesn't make sense to me. Basically, that term was coined by Ethan Marcotte. And basically what it means is, well, this website will respond to different viewports and different environments of different devices, okay? So, again, we're gonna cover in other words, we're gonna cover the specifics to get the thing done in this class, but for a little wider knowledge base, you're gonna want to get those books and read long chapters, right? Because I know everybody loves reading. As a supplemental text or suggested, if you're having trouble with Dreamweaver, you might want to get that book. But basically, the two required, you should be fine with that. Quite honestly, if you accidentally don't get those two books, you might be fine as well, right? But we're going to do that. So because this is a 2-credit class and it's kind of a workshop class, I'm not going to have salons on the reading materials and stuff like that. I'm not going to have any exams. You're not going to do a reading response paper, turn that into me, right? Because you guys are still doing all that stuff, right? Yeah. Okay. In Lord Razzle's class, anybody have Lord Razzle? You know what I'm talking about? Mark Hasselhorn. Call him Lord Razzle one day, just out of the blue. He gave up his gamer name in class one day, accidentally. He didn't mean to. Does everybody know who I'm talking about? Yeah, he's so awesome. I love that guy. But don't tell him you heard that from me. So, grading procedure. Basically, we're going to be doing, like I said, the exercises each week. And exercises will be due. So, if we have class Wednesday nights, you have till the next Wednesday at 9 a.m. to have your assignment done, right? You don't have to submit your assignment or email it to us, right? Like I said, that's where the student list and the links to your URLs, Thomas will just go randomly check without you knowing, and will grade your assignment as he sees fit. Meaning, if you did the exercise to what we're doing in class requirements and it's done on time, you're gonna get a 4.0, right? I'm not trying to make this, I want you to learn something and have a good time. I don't want to bust your chops so hard that, you get frustrated and you got other classes to really, frustrate you. So, trust me, I know all about it. Any accommodations, please contact them. They'll contact me. Code of conduct. If you haven't taken a look at the University of Washington's student code of conduct, you might want to. All right. So that being said, any questions so far? Does this look like this is the class you're expecting to take for the most part? Good. Yay. I like when that happens. So
Are the two books, there's you put the 2011 one and the 2014 one, does it make any difference on the edition?
is there a new edition of this one? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
I did not know that. I haven't looked at the new edition. So there's always got to be something new happening, right? I would imagine that the new edition is just a little bit updated from the old one and probably pretty much the same in terms of an outline. So I guess that will be your choice. Yeah. Bless you. So again, to go through the schedule where we're going. Today, we're gonna then talk about web standards, the basics of HTML and CSS, how to publish your website, and then we're going to together go set up your server space. And again, if you have Dreamweaver, I probably should have wrote you guys an email last week telling you guys you needed Dreamweaver. Like I said, has anybody ever wondered what David Lee Roth was like as a 5-year-old? Because he lives at my house. He's a cute little 5-year-old, but daddy's full time, is what I'm saying. And this is, you know, emails like that. So my apologies that I didn't do that. But then what we're going to do is week by week, like I said, we are going to be, I'll be referencing my lectures that are just basically my PowerPoint notes, right? And then the exercises. So if we take a look at the creating your first web page exercise, what I have tried to do is give you a step-by-step tutorial type lecture or type exercise that week by week builds off of one another. So if you are not done with the exercise from the previous week, by the time we come into class Wednesday, you're going to be stuck and not be able to do that week's assignment until you catch up, okay? But hopefully what I've done here is, I'll say it like this. I need a script to go through, right? So these exercises then are my script. Step 1, step 2, step 3, et cetera, right? Some of them are more involved than others, but then again, like I said, we will be recording them so you can review. We'll be doing this together, right? We are going to be hand coding as much as possible. I am not a fan of copying and pasting. Why I'm not a fan of copying and pasting, especially when it comes to HTML and CSS, right? If you are going to, in other words, if you see that well, let's not do that one. Let's go to page layout. Let's do that. Jeez. Well, let's just stay out this one for the time being. If you go and start, there we go. If you go and start just copying those snippets of code and pasting them into your document, I don't know how else to say it other than you're not going to learn shit. Let's just say it like that, right? What I've seen over the years is if students start copying snippets, they think, oh, well, this isn't that hard until it doesn't work the way they want it. And then they don't know where it's broken down because they've just put puzzle pieces together where they didn't actually build the puzzle pieces, right? So we are going to then go and type all this stuff out, right? Now, Dreamweaver has built-in code hints. A lot of IDEs or internet developing environments or code editors, whatever you want to say, have a lot of code hints. In other words, if I start typing out background, it is then going to give me the hint of, do you want to select background image, background position, background repeat, right? I cheat, I use the code hints. I'm a miserable speller, right? But at least I will know how all the components work together, okay? That being said, there is going to be an exercise where we, see if I can open that one up. Where we are going to be doing a contact form. And when we're doing that contact form, we are going to be using a PHP script. So that gets into conditional programming, right? So the people that have done conditional programming, meaning if this is the case, statement, else, statement. Who understood me when I just said that? Okay. Good. Oh, sweet. Have you guys, a lot of you guys done Python or JavaScript or stuff like that? Okay, good. Right. So yeah, you know, the more you type it out, the more you're going to learn. But when it comes to this one right here, for example, we'll talk about how this script works, but I'm not going to expect you to type all that out by hand, right? If you can, you're going to learn more, but with the time constraints in the class, right, that may not happen, but we'll see. So, the last time I taught this, about 7 o'clock, some people were like, oh, I gotta pee, right? Do you guys need to take a break, or do you want to just bullet on through till 8 o'clock? Keep going till 8 o'clock? Okay. Like I said, if you have to pee, go back and watch the video. So let's start out then by talking about web standards. I'm going to open up the rest of these. Open. So, standards in general. I doubt anybody remembers this, but does anybody remember the so-called browser wars between Netscape and Internet Explorer? Okay. Fun times, especially if you were a JavaScript developer back then, because you would have to write one script that used the document object model for Netscape and one script that used the document object model for Internet Explorer. Does anybody know what the document object model is? Okay, we'll get to that here in a second. But let's say it like this. I can't remember which used which, but one used document.all, another one used document.layers. So if you needed to access an element within the page via JavaScript, you had to write 2 different scripts for it to work, one in Internet Explorer and one in Netscape. Well, that was a waste of time, right? Does anybody work for Microsoft in here at all? Okay. I'll try not to, razz on Internet Explorer too much, right? But what ended up happening was the browsers like the Mozilla platform browsers and the WebKit platform browsers, Netscape and Firefox, Safari, and then now Chrome and that kind of stuff, started standardizing a little bit earlier, right? And Microsoft kind of went kicking and screaming into obeying the standards and that kind of stuff. But there was a time when even myself, I wanted to send invoices to Microsoft because it worked in all the other browsers except Internet Explorer. Right? Then came Tim Berners-Lee, who is the guy that is credited with inventing the internet, even though Al Gore tried to take credit for that way back when. He didn't. He said something and we jumped on about it. But he pushed for standards, and the World Wide Web Consortium was formed. So also known as the W3C, and I cannot say that without thinking W.C. Fields. I don't know why, just let me have it. But if we go here, this is then all the documentation to all the new standards. In other words, HTML1, HTML2, HTML3. We are now up to HTML5, okay? We went from HTML 1, 2, 3 to XHTML to, that's stupid, let's go back to regular HTML. And now we're at HTML5, right? But there is, I'm going to show you the differences between XHTML and HTML5 because there's a good chance that if you are going to be working in this environment, you're going to be working on legacy code, okay? So the World Wide Web Consortium is basically the international standards organization, et cetera. So technology standards. What technology then are we going to use, and how does that necessarily work? Okay. So I'm sure all of you have heard of hypertext transfer protocol in one way, shape, or form, right? If you have ever seen then HTTP, you have seen hypertext transfer protocol. If you have ever seen HTTPS, that is a super secret form of that protocol. I don't know what makes it super secret and secure. I'm not a security expert. I just know that it exists and it's much more secure. But one way, shape, or form, we are going to, from our computer, right? Or let's say it like this. This is a typical response request, right? Diagram, meaning when you load a web page on your 1993 iMac here, right? I don't know what version of that is, but I saw that graphic and I'm like, yeah, I gotta use that one. Right? Anybody have one of those old ones? Little dome kind of thing? So if you are loading a web page, what is actually happening is you are making a request from some web server wherever it lives, right? And it is then, as a response, outputting here, okay, into the client. So has anybody ever heard your computer referred to as client side? Okay, so if you have ever heard the term client side scripting versus server side scripting, who's heard that? Okay. So what that basically means is, let's say it like this, JavaScript. JavaScript controls this little slideshow right here. More specifically, jQuery, right? jQuery is a JavaScript, you can call it a framework, a library, whatever you want to call it, but it basically is a client-side language, meaning if I view page source and we view a little script tag right here, right? And this is a pretty easy one. This is the toggle, the really stripped down toggle menu one that we're going to do. But in a script tag, this basically says window.load, enable the user to click on the toggle ID, and once they do that, it'll take the ID of navigation and open it. If it's closed, it closes it if it's open. Okay? So this right here is said to be a client-side language because when you load it in your browser, the browser compiles it, caches it, right? And it'll run as long as that window is open. Versus then a server-side language like if we take a look at up there, PHP include, go get the header file, that has to load when, in other words, that script runs and loads a set of HTML along with it. In other words, if and when I load index.php, index.php comes along and says, oh, I've got to go dig into the server and grab the header file. The header file consists of a set of HTML, right, some jQuery, etc., that then gets compiled up at the top of the document. So if I were to then view index.php or the index file, you don't see the PHP script. What you see is the compiled, if that's the right term, compiled HTML that is written into the client side, the browser. That's what you see. So in other words, has anybody ever tried to like view source on a website like Amazon? You're like, where's all the scripty stuff? You can't see it. What is actually happening is the server-side code is, I'll say it like this, and we'll get to it in a second. PHP, I kind of refer to as HTML's bigger brother. It tells HTML where to be, what to do, and how to behave, right? Where to write and stuff, okay? So you don't see the script client side. Does that make sense in theory? Again, we'll get all into it down the line here. Uniform resource locator, URI or URL. Uniform resource indicator, I think, is the other way of saying it. What does that mean? Using hypertext transfer protocol on the www, the World Wide Web, we are then looking at the server of premiumdw.com. There then is a folder called portfolio that a file called portfolio.html lives in. Okay? So if we were to look at the, see, I told you I was going to start right there at the bottom basement stuff, right? So if we look at this URL, right, you don't see the HTTP, www, etc., because Chrome says to you, you don't need to see that for the bazillion time, right? But if you've ever, has anybody ever copied a URL and pasted it into an email, right? And then you see the HTTP, etc., right? So Chrome is just like, yeah, you don't need to see that. What you need to see is faculty.washington.edu, a username, sync them, in a folder, make your website responsive, a file called index.php. Okay? Anybody know why you use dashes instead of underscores in file names? Search engine optimization. For a long time, browsers would read an underscore, not as a space. So if I said website underscore responsive, the Google machine would have read that all as one word, versus Google machine would read website and responsive as two different words with a space because of a dash. They've long since figured that out and worked around that, but that's why that convention has taken shape. So the document object model. Here's what we were talking about earlier in terms of, okay, well, if I'm Netscape way back in the 90s, or I'm Internet Explorer way back in the 90s, what do I use? Document.layers or document.all, right? In other words, I believe there was a layers tag, and I believe there was an all tag. I wasn't a JavaScript developer back in those days. I started doing HTML, really writing my own HTML, probably 2002 or so. And by that time, that war had been over and standards had come out. Okay? So basically what the document object model is, and you will hear that a lot when referencing JavaScript, right? JavaScript developers are continuously talking about the DOM, okay? Meaning, the document object model, or DOM, is a cross-platform, language-independent convention for representing and interacting with objects in HTML, XHTML, et cetera, et cetera. So, here's some old JavaScript. Function, switch picks, number. If your browser understands document.getElementById, meaning the whatever version of JavaScript and the whatever version your browser, does it understand that convention via standards? Well, if it does, then get the ID of slides in the document. Furthermore, get the source attribute of the ID of slides in the document. So the document object model means that document is an object. The ID of slides is an object. The source attribute is an object, right? So if we looked at, where was it? The view source here. We're long since away from the days of asking if the browser understands document.getElementById. If your browser does not understand document.getElementById, your browser has no business being there, right? So in this day and age, how many of you have ever seen the dollar sign? Okay, you ever wondered what it meant? In PHP, the dollar sign represents a variable. That's how variables start in PHP. In JavaScript, specifically jQuery, jQuery being a library of JavaScript, right? The dollar sign represents document.getElementById. So it's shorthand. So when I say a library, jQuery, and we'll get more into the specifics down the road. I know I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you that we're going to totally step by step get into down the road. Document.getElementById then is represented in jQuery as its own library, right? So you have to load jQuery. Your browser accesses the jQuery file that sniffs into the jQuery file and says, oh, the dollar sign equals getElementById, or document.getElementById. Well, back to here, which element? Toggle. Document, just kind of like a Google Doc. I have a written document. It's a document. Go look through that document and get the idea of toggle. There it is right there, right? So this is a way of saying this image element, its name, I've identified it as toggle. Toggle can only be once on the page at a time, right? Furthermore, if we want to say the source attributes in the ID of toggle in the document, hence the document object model or DOM tree, if you will, right? So in other words, what is an object? This is an image tag. It is an object, right? How many of you have heard the term object-oriented programming, right? Kind of similar, right? We make an object, And when we're programming, we say, go get that object and do whatever you need to do with it, right? Same thing. Here is an object. It's just an HTML object, also known as a element. So the more common language to use is we'll talk about what an HTML element is. Okay? So again, code standards, what we are going to be using is HTML, hypertext markup language. Well, what is hypertext markup language? Well, it's nothing more, nothing less than a series of tags to represent, that's a paragraph, right? It's different than a heading because it's in a p tag. So if I looked at, again, the source code here, we need a way of marking this up, meaning it's almost like an outline, right? It's a way of the machine to find the labeled element, the labeled cog, the labeled whatever, fill in the, metaphor that you want to choose to access information. Label it, identify it, manipulate it, present it, etc. So if I have a paragraph tag in a strong tag, this is saying, that's not really, here's a better paragraph tag, right? So this is saying, behave like a paragraph, right? Act like a paragraph in terms of how Google indexes you, right? So Google treats, when you are doing indexing of a website, Google will prioritize paragraphs differently than headlines. How they do it, I don't work for Google. Google is very secretive about their algorithms and that kind of stuff. But what I do know is that it's treated differently. I do know that an H2 tag is treated differently than an H1 tag, right? So has anybody ever been a print designer, ever? Worked on magazines, maybe?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you ever use Quark or InDesign?
Oh, yes.
Okay. So when you were using Quark or InDesign, you had a hierarchy to your magazine layout in terms of text. This was the master headline. This was a sub-headline. This is even a third level headline in terms of the hierarchy of information, right? And then in the program of InDesign, you then had styles that you said this headline is this size and this font. So we're doing the same thing, right? So we have an H2 tag. How do we know that then that H2 tag should look like that? That's where presentation comes in and says, go look at the markup and present said markup like this. So back up here, HTML is written in the form of HTML elements, again, objects, elements, consisting of tags, enclosed and angle brackets like HTML or H1, starting tag, ending tag, okay? So in the earlier versions of HTML, you didn't have to use a closing tag. Now you have to, right? But nonetheless, in between these tags or elements, that's where you can put text or images or more sets of tags, right? Meaning, I have an element that's a division tag. Inside that division tag, I have another element that is an unordered list or a bulleted list of elements. These list items are then the bulleted lists items. Inside those list items are images. So it's how elements are nested within elements, creating what is called a parent-child relationship, right? Sibling relationship. In other words, these are siblings. These are children of the parent. This is then the grandparent element. Okay? But when it comes to presenting, this is where we are going to use what's called cascading style sheets. So when I said talking about Quark or InDesign, you're using styles, or in Word. We're using styles. We're basically saying that that H1 tag is going to be size 32 pixels. It is going to be the font family of felt tip Roman, right? So if I then looked at this one, if we look at talk about the document object model again, right? There is an object or an element called the body tag inside the document. I'm going to say that everything in the body tag inside the document is going to be Arial, Helvetica, Sans Serif. Everything. Except for one little random thing. Now, I don't think I have it in this document here. I think I used Arial for everything. But if I wanted to say, well, only the H2 elements are going to be felt tip Roman. In terms of how the cascade works, everything in the body is Arial, except that one little thing that we want to be felt tip Roman, right? So it cascades down, and we'll go over this more in detail, where this one inherits the body tag declaration, but then changes the declaration. Trust me, this will get a lot more interesting when we start coding. I understand that, oh, first day of class, lots of, I understand. So, okay. We've briefly gone through JavaScript. What is JavaScript? Also known as ECMAScript. ECMA being the standard organization. Why JavaScript? Because Sun Microsystems had developed a language called Java, and they thought it was cool. So whoever developed JavaScript said JavaScript is cool. Seriously, that's what happened. It is the most idiotic naming thing ever, because now we as a development community have to say, did you mean Java or JavaScript? It's awesome. But again, JavaScript is primarily used client-side to do things like the toggle menu and to do the slideshow type stuff, right? PHP is a great story. What does PHP actually stand for? Personal homepage. I swear. Ramsey Lairdorf, or whatever his name is, that created the language, named it personal homepage. That's worse than the JavaScript stuff, as far as I'm concerned. What it really kind of stands for is hypertext preprocessor, right? This is where, again, PHP is, like I said, HTML's older brother. it says, it pushes it around, it tells it, okay, if this is the condition, then write this HTML into the page. It can be a lot more complex than that, but that is pretty much the rudimentary foundation of a scripting language that says, all right, well, what are the conditions? What's going on? If this is the condition, write this set of HTML, or put this data inside this HTML element, et cetera, or don't. Or if this condition is true, else if this condition is true, or don't. That kind of stuff, okay? So we end at 8 o'clock. I want to get into the setting up your server space here pretty quickly. So I sort of feel like we've, here's what happens. I have my script that I inevitably go off script and do a little improv because I know what I'm going to be talking about. And then ultimately I come back to the script and say, well, you've already talked about a little bit of this, right? So, but what is HTML? XHTML, this is where for a while, you might come across this, right? It was HTML1, HTML2, HTML3, HTML4, screw HTML, we're gonna go and say XHTML now. What that really means is HTML, old HTML, was a very non-strict language, meaning I could write an opening p tag, but I didn't have to write a closing p tag, and the browser would understand it. XML, anybody use XML at all? No? Nobody's written a cat tag before? You can create your own tags. HTML came along and said, well, XML has a better syntax. Let's adopt the XML syntax and be a lot stricter. Meaning, everything is now going to be in lowercase. Did anybody ever see old HTML that's all uppercase? That's really wicked old HTML, right? Attribute values must be quoted. In other words, source is an attribute of the image tag. Its value needs to be quoted or inside quotes. Old HTML didn't have to be. Again, just know every time I go and say something quick and you're like, what? We're going to go over it again. No minimization, right? In other words, if your value of your attribute is the same name as your attribute, you just have to write the name of the attribute. Couldn't do that anymore. Screw that. Structure of an HTML file. If you've ever looked behind the scenes, you may have seen this really long doc type. Anybody view source and seen this really long thing that if you had to type that out by yourself over and over again? Who memorized that? Anybody? Right? Not me, I'll tell you that. So this is XHTML, pretty long doc type. Doc type meaning expect HTML browser. Tags. So HTML is, like I said, a series of tags, which is a markup, H1, P, list item, etc. Along comes HTML5, and they say, screw that super long doc type, let's make it just like that. Screw that super long character encoding meta tag, let's shorten it to just that, etc. What is CSS? Again, CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. It is how you display markup, okay? So I really wish, I only need to write on the whiteboard every now and again. Let's say it like this. Markup, presentation, interaction. HTML, markup, CSS, cascading style sheets. Interaction, like the slideshow, JavaScript. The more you can separate those, the more organized your code is going to be. Especially when it comes to your boss saying, you know, instead of 14 points, how about we make everything 13 points, right? So back in the old days, you would have to go into the markup file and change everything to 13 in the font tab. Now, with cascading style sheets, you can go in and change one line of code to say everything is 13, right? Your JavaScript is over here, right? But that script needs to be accessed on every page. You can have this one file that is linked to that HTML page. And if I need to change something, I only have to change it once for it to behave and control stuff on it, right? So structure of a CSS file, basically how style sheets work is we have selectors that represent HTML elements, an H1 tag, and rules. That element is going to be 500 pixels wide. Hey, what if I want to change every last H1 tag to 503 pixels wide? I don't have to go do that in every single page. I can do it once. So it's basically efficiency of code, right? Modularizing your code into, in other words, if you ever have to write the same thing twice, right, you might consider a better way of doing it. In other words, who are those people that have done some HTML in the past? Okay. Have you ever written a navigation scheme? Menu item 1, menu item 2, menu item 3, menu item 4. And then you had to add menu item 5 into it. Did you have to go into each page and add menu item 5? Good, you modularized your code. Yeah, header. So you did a PHP include? ASP include?
I don't know what that is.
Some kind of include.
Something.
Some kind of an include or modularization, right? So that's what I'm saying. If you have just a raw who's ever had multiple HTML files that you had to go in and change something like that on every single page, the same thing? Anybody? Okay, right? So, yeah, we'll teach you how to modularize your code. But now, because we have a half an hour left, here's what you need to do. We can do this a little bit later. Let's first and foremost, well, let's talk about, file management. Let's briefly talk file management. If I go to the root of my username on faculty.washington.edu, you will notice that I have several folders in there. I'll be building along with you guys in a 2016 folder. Okay? You are going to keep your files on your hard drive. And when you save them and they are ready to be published, you are going to FTP them, or using file transfer protocol, put them, put is the actual word, to your server to be viewed by the public. Okay? So what we need to do to start off with is, on your hard drive, does everybody have kind of a school projects folder? right? And in that, well, look, here's my old masters folder that is taking up space on my hard drive. Back in my day, when I was in HCDE532, this was my folder on my hard drive. So if you have some kind of a setup like this, you might want to make an HCDE532 folder. Okay? Within that HCDE532 folder, so I have mine now under school because these are all the classes I teach. So I have an HCDE532 folder on my hard drive. Inside that folder, now you guys probably are not going to be working with big Photoshop files or big Illustrator files because you're not really designing anything new in this class. But if I had a project folder where 532 was my project, I would separate things into HTML, all my pixelated, rasterized Photoshop files, and all of my vector, Illustrator, PDF, etc. files. You guys use Illustrator or Photoshop, anybody? Good. Because, here's why I separate them. You do not want to FTP your 100 meg layered Photoshop file to your server. Because A, it'll take a long time, and B, your server probably won't have space for it, maybe. So instead, you will be, if you were doing this out in the wild, you would be taking your Photoshop file, right, that if you needed some kind of background imagery, or I don't know, if you had a photo that you were editing, right? We don't really do a whole lot of mock-ups like we used to in Photoshop and then slicing as much as we used to, because now you can do drop shadows and that kind of stuff in CSS versus, you know, having to make rounded corners. Did they ever have to make rounded corners in Photoshop if you wanted them as an element of HTML? Yeah, long past those days, right? But if you wanted to use something like a bullet or a background file, right, you would then slice and optimize it and put it in an images folder that is with your HTML, okay? So what I'm going to do now is, in my HTML folder, I'm going to make a 2016 project folder, right? You guys should probably just make an HTML folder, okay? Because you are going to be posting your stuff at the root of your domain. Meaning, if I'm talking about my domain, my server space, okay, and I went to the 215 folder, this is where last year's work lives, right? It's not as polished as the demo, right? You may see pink lines in there where we were editing stuff and having a good time. But nonetheless, you could publish yours straight at the root of your folder. But here's the big thing. The root of your domain equals your HTML folder. Meaning, did that make sense to anybody? If I am going to be publishing this is incredibly important in terms of file management. So I'm glad we're recording this. if I look here, right? And for those viewing it, I'll talk to you guys. So if and when you guys are watching this back at home or on videotape, right? What I've, one time I was like at the projector going this and that and this and that, and obviously the people at home have no idea what I'm pointing at, right? So what I'm saying is, if these are my local files here in Dreamweaver, I am pointing to the HTML folder that is inside my HCDE532 folder, in my school folder, in my documents folder on my Mac. It is a one-to-one relationship with the public HTML folder under my username on the faculty.washington servers. So if and when I do something like this, right? In other words, I opened up the file index.php in my 215 folder, inside my HTML folder, inside the 532 folder. If I do that, and then I have this selected here and hit put file remotely. Has anybody ever seen somebody select a file on their hard drive and use a program like FileZilla or something and drag it into a completely separate folder on a remote site? Who's seen that? And then seeing them go, ah, wrong folder. That's what we're trying to avoid. We are trying to build a one-to-one relationship of my files here to my files on my server, so that if I then go and look at the 215, where was it? 215, yeah, index.php, and I open that up, or went to my 215 folder, viewed page source, that comment is now in that file. So we need to, in other words, your HTML folder, right, equals your public HTML folder. That's the one thing I want you to pick up on your server space. So now, what you need to do, has anybody ever enabled their web server space at the University of Washington? Okay. If you have not, guess what we're doing right now? So, let's start some of the more fun stuff, is what I'm saying. Thank you for listening to me yap through all that. So if you go to today's exercise, setting up your server space, do I already have it open? I do. If you're on this exercise, there is this link here, manage your accounts. Or I believe, did I link this? Yeah, I linked this screenshot. No, I did not. if you click on manage your account and you log in, it will take you to this page where you guys need to turn on web publishing. So this screenshot in the lecture, you guys need to turn on, so if you see inactive services here, how many sees inactive services here, right? And it says web publishing and student web publishing, or something of those things. A little different now? Okay. Those need to be turned on by hitting the subscribe button, which if you do that correctly, they should end up sitting up here. Make sense? Step one. Step two.
1 second. Computer services on the inactive services. I don't have the same checkbox.
See what you got. Just for shits and giggles.
None of us did it.
Dante Virgil. Yes. Student web publishing. Radius? No. Because basically you need to say, hey, I'm a student, I want to activate my web publishing, and I need a server. So I believe they changed mine now to, because I'm a faculty, right? If you have web publishing, and I think yours is Dante, yes? Is that what you see? I'm on Ovid or Homer. So meaning the actual machine. So yours should be student web publishing or web publishing and Dante or whatever, okay? Everybody activated that? Okay. So again, my apologies for not telling you that we were gonna be using Dreamweaver. But again, how many of you have Dreamweaver accessible today? How many of you do not? Okay. So like I said, if you get it done by next class period, we're all good. So let me show you what you need to do.
CP works for all of the different servers. Do we know that? Like Ovid, Homer, does they FileZilla or something?
Yeah, it should. So let's say it like this. If you've activated your account, right? You then need to go to see what server you're on. So if you go to this website, well, let's say it like this. First, you'll need to activate your account. So if we're on the exercise today, right, you need to activate your account on the University of Washington's shared web hosting server. So this link right here will take you to information about UW's shared web hosting server. And sure enough, the links changed on me. So good thing I looked at that before I came to class today. So I put the new link in here. So this is where activating UW shared web hosting, that's where I believe you go to the same thing that we were just on. And then you have to go through the long thing to basically get to the manage stuff, right? Let's close some of these windows. I have a habit of opening a bazillion and one tabs. It's just what I do. It's a little bit better. Okay, so setting up a server space, right? So if we go then to this website URL reference guide here, this is what's happening. So I'm faculty So I am posting my pages to faculty.washington.edu, my net ID, right? So if we look at my server space, oh, which I just closed. Right? Faculty.washington.edu, my net ID. If you are a student and you're not a TA, you're going to be posting to students.washington.edu using your net ID. If you are a TA, you might be staff, and they might have moved you to staff.washington.edu, right? Again, who are the paid TAs? 1, 2, 3, okay? So you three should try this first, the students, and if it doesn't work, try the staff. So what does this crap mean? Let me show you. In Dreamweaver, or if you're in any FTP program, you need to connect your local files to your server space and then FTP them. And if you stand right here, it's a big echo dome, and it sounds really, really funny. And every time I go and stand right here, it always makes me. You guys should do it right here. Not now, but. So, if I'm in Dreamweaver, right, I have two panels that we're going to basically use. The code editing panel and the site managing panel, okay? So what I'm going to need to do, what you're going to need to do is set up a new site, right? Meaning, if I looked at all of my sites here, yes, Kitty Likes Avocado is a real domain name and is a real client of mine, okay? But here are, what I have a habit of doing is I label my sites, meaning the connection between my local files and my server files, with the domain that they're on, faculty.washington.edu, right? Instead of saying, my crappity crap, because that doesn't really mean anything, right? I know that Kitty Likes Avocado is actually going to kittylikesavocado.com. Okay? You can see all my other stuff, a lot of the stuff I work on. But what you need to do is you need to create a new site and save it, which consists of, yeah, it's just a temporary, basically Kitty Likes Avocado is a fake band for a guy who wrote a book called The Guide to Success in the Music Industry. So if you're going to be a band, here's how to make it. And that's W. But he's a real paying client. Whatever, because Kitty Likes Avocado. Great. So what you need to do then is I will make a new site. I'll make a duplicate, right? So if I say new site, here's the information that I need to put in. I need to name it. So I'm going to say, because I'm using my faculty.washington, right? Let's name it like this. And to differentiate it from the other one, I am going to say, put in my username, okay? So you're going to say students.washington.edu, and you can put in your username if you want to, or whatever, right? I then need to choose Am I not allowed to use those? Probably. We'll name it 2 for right now. So I need to then point to my local site folder. Okay? My local site folder is my HTML folder inside my 532 folder. So if I want to basically put all of these files, FTP them to my server, I can. Choose that. So that's setting up the local connection. Now we need to connect our remote connection. Here under servers, we are going to click the plus button.
How do you get that?
So do you have the site manager open? Okay. So here in the left-hand side, site is basically the local information. Who's asking? I have a big spotlight here on me. So, cool. Servers is the remote information, your server information, your students.washington info. Okay. So you then are going to go, and what you need to do is hit the plus sign. And this is where let's do it like this. This is where I'm going to put faculty.washington.edu, etc. But I'm going to cancel this. I'm going to cancel this one. And I'm just going to show you my settings for the current one that I have. Okay. So let's go back here and say, if I'm creating faculty.washington.edu site, or your students.washington, and I am pointing to my local site folder, my HTML folder, then I need to say, where am I connecting it to? So I go to servers. And that's where you can hit the plus sign, and it's going to ask you to put in stuff. I am going to be putting in server name, faculty.washington.edu. SFTP. So instead of using unsecure, insecure, neurotic, basic FTP, nobody got that one? Insecure, neurotic? I work hard on these jokes. So, and also after the dry, right? We're going to use SFTP. So you are going to choose from the drop-down list SFTP. Now, SFTP address, ovid.u.washington.edu. That is the machine name.
Ours is Dante, right?
Correct. So, how do you know? Well, let's go back here. And we can say, faculty, more information. And I'm going to see that if I go to faculty, more information, I am going to use Ovid. If I'm a student, why they have Ovid and Virgil over there, I don't know. but where was it? Where was it? Generally, students will use Virgil. You might be using Dante. This is where it's not incredibly clear to me with their documentation, and I wish it was. So, try virgil.u.washington.edu. And then I'm going to go back a couple of steps and say, what's staff? Staff is on Virgil. Finding your server. So finding your server. Let's just read that out loud in front of class because they keep changing stuff on me. And here it is. All UW students are eligible to use a shared web hosting development environment known as Virgil. Okay? So generally students will use virgil.u.washington.edu. I'm understanding this to be that that is what you are going to use here. Okay? Did anybody try that?
Yeah.
Who? Did it work? Oh, fabulous. Great. Great. Then you are going to authenticate using username and password. And here again, I'm pointing at the projector, and people at home are like, what is he pointing at? So you are going to authenticate using username and password. Has anybody ever used a private key file? An SSH key? Few people. Well, you're not going to do that. Let's put it that way. But you are going to use your typical net ID and net password. You can then hit test. Who did that successfully? Sweet. Now, you need to, I believe, so let me ask you this. Let me say it like this. If I delete my root directory there, and I save it, and I save this, and then I wait for the pinwheel of death. My machine's getting old. I got a 2009 over here, right? It's about time, you know, daddy on his teacher salary buys a new box. But if I then connect to my remote server, right? Do you see a folder called public HTML or student HTML? Yeah. Do you see on your, so if you've logged into your server with your username,
After I saved it.
after, so do this. So if you're managing your site here, right, and you save it, and you go back to your site manager, see here where it says remote server? Okay. Is there a public HTML folder there? Let me take a look. Who's got it? Let me take a look at this. Let me see how you got. So if you, there. So that's all I need to know. One time as students. All I need.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay, so I had your answer.
Oh, because I already typed in.
Because you already typed in the directory. So you guys, your setting, because again, every year the settings are different, and there's little variations. I have to go over, check it out, see what's going on, because they're trying to test my patience, right? Because again, I'm not a student anymore, so I don't see what you guys see, right? But at one time, the folder was student_HTML, and I was like, so what you guys then are going to do is here in the root directory box, there is typically on some servers a public HTML folder that however your server is configured, right, it's going to go to your username, and there are possibly like some CGI files and not CGI like computer graphic type Star Wars CGI, more of the CGI, whatever it stands for, language, and then Perl and some other kind of bash type stuff, right? So you need to publish inside the directory of the public HTML folder. So if you put public HTML / here, right, and save, if you've done that, how many of you, if you choose remote right here, how many of you see an index.html file? You are successfully patched into your server and have completed this week's exercise. Right, exactly. And we only went 10 minutes over. Because class ends at 7:50. I try to, kind of consistent with the clock. So if you have not done that, one last thing. If you have not done that, by next week, you need to have done that in Dreamweaver. Like I said, let's stop our YouTube recording.